All right, continuing our conversation regarding Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, his speech today on Capitol Hill. It's a fairly rare occasion for a foreign dignitary to address a joint session of Congress. Pretty big deal. So today's event highlighted the special relationship between the United States and Israel. But among the subtext of the president's address are the tensions that exist between the Biden administration, the Democratic Party, and Israel. In particular, regarding Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's efforts for judicial reform. So, how were today's events received in Israel? How do they view this relationship and the tension that's there? Joining me now with a live reaction from Jerusalem is CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell. Chris, welcome to Washington Watch.
Tony, great to be with you again.
Hey, thanks so much for staying up late. I know it's about midnight over there in Israel. So what was the reaction there in Israel to President Herzog's trip here to the United States?
Well, I think there were two reactions, Tony. First of all, I think there was across the political spectrum, I think there was unanimity about the speech. Yair Lapid, he's the opposition leader. He said it was good, the fact that that Herzog had talked about democracy and about the issues that Israel is going through with judicial reform. Prime Minister Netanyahu praised the speech as well, and he said that glad that the President Isaac Herzog had raised the issue of a nuclear Iran, and he thought that was very important. So I think generally the speech was well received by across the political spectrum here in Israel. On the other hand, there is that tension that you mentioned between the White House and the Netanyahu coalition and Benjamin Netanyahu personally. It's been 7 months since the Netanyahu's been in power, and yet he's never received an invitation to the White House. They did have a phone call the other day, but even there, it's unclear whether or not Netanyahu will be actually meeting with the president at the White House, maybe at the UN in September. So the rift between the Biden administration, the White House, and the Netanyahu government remains.
So what do you think is driving that, and what do Israelis see as the real issue there?
Well, I think they disagree pretty strongly with what the Netanyahu government is doing with judicial reform. In fact, just in a few days, there's probably going to be a vote on one of the biggest measures of that reform, which is the fact that, whether or not a Supreme Court justice here in Israel can actually strike down a law, whether it's reasonable or unreasonable. That's something that we don't have in the U.S. Supreme Court. And so they're trying to rectify that. And ironically, some of the people that are opposing this legislation actually proposed that kind of reform several years ago. So there's quite a rift going on. And I think it goes on deeper, Tony, than just the idea of judicial reform. There's demonstrations that have been going on, some of them funded from international sources for 7 months now. And it's not just judicial reform. There really seems to be an idea to try to undermine the current coalition government and maybe overturn it.
I want to ask you about that, but first I want to go back for just a moment for the benefit of our viewers and listeners. Explain the relationship between the president, the Israeli president, and the Israeli prime minister.
Well, the president is really a ceremonial office. The one thing that he does have in politics is when there's an election, he meets with all the political parties and decides which party can become, try to form a coalition government. But other than that, it's really a ceremonial office, and it's really the prime minister who's leading and governing over here. So to have Isaac Herzog, as great a speech as he made today, it's really not Israel's leader. It's really a ceremonial office. So there is a big difference between the president over here and the prime minister.
Because in the past, it's been the Israeli prime minister. In fact, I've been in the chamber before when Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke to a joint session. So it would normally be kind of him that would be speaking on behalf of the nation.
Exactly, and that's what Prime Minister Netanyahu did back in 2015, probably when you were there in the chambers at that time. There's a sense by some people over here that the Biden administration does not want Netanyahu over there to make his case about Iran and other issues, and they would rather have him over here and not be in the spotlight in Washington like he was back in 2015. Tony, you remember that many of the people in the Biden White House right now were the same people that were in the Obama White House back in 2015, and there really was a rift then between Netanyahu and President Obama and his White House. There seems to be the same thing going on right now.
Yeah, and he really captured the media with his speech. So back on the judicial reform initiative of the Prime Minister, how does the Israeli public take the United States that has its own issues? I mean, we've been having battles over the Supreme Court in the last multiple election cycles. How do they respond to us kind of sticking our nose in your judicial business?
Well, it was interesting. Senator Langford made that point as well. I mean, the administration and others are saying that, you got to take care of, you have consensus here in judicial reform while they are trying to change the character of the U.S. Supreme Court. I think a lot of Israelis would prefer that the U.S. would stay out of the internal affairs of here in Israel. This was a democratically elected coalition government. A lot of people may not like the makeup, but it's really what the Israeli people have voted on. And I think they would prefer that they could settle their own issues without outside interference and pressure from the Biden administration.
Chris, we're up against a break, but very quickly, how can our viewers and listeners be praying for you and for Israel?
Well, pray for wisdom. You can pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and you can pray that Israel would be protected from outside influence. Right now, they have internal divisions, but they also have external threats like Hezbollah, Iran, and others, and pray for the protection of Israel at this sensitive and very delicate time.
All right, Chris Mitchell will do that. And again, thanks so much for staying up late and joining us tonight.
Good to be with you, Tony.